I always say France is the Beatles of the wine world. They may not be like the best, depending on who you're talking to and what your opinions are, but they are the OG. Like they were at all the places in the world emulate what the French did.
Welcome back to the podcast, guys. I'm so excited to share this next interview with you because Vince is the best.
Yes, we found Vince by his content. We were looking online. He has the show V is for Vino, which, if you couldn't tell by the name, is all about wine. And yes, we found one of his episodes, and basically, like everyone does in today's culture, we slid into his DMs.
Sounds so sketchy. But when we watched Vince on his YouTube show, I mean, we were transported to these destinations, and we were really thirsty because these wines looked amazing, and we just had to reach out. And I'm so excited to share his world of wine with you.
I mean, we've had so much fun talking with Vince. We've had conversations with him before just to understand the world, because as a fellow creator, we connected, but we wanted to share his story with you guys as well. And we dive into all the details. We find out some of his most memorable experiences. Spoiler alert, it's Lebanon. And just the path that he's gone on to create this show. This is the perfect example of someone who kind of had a dream, but it wasn't clear. I mean, that's the amazing part. He didn't know exactly what he wanted to do, but he got up there and started making things, and all of a sudden he's created this amazing show with a very loyal following.
He had the passion and he had the curiosity to seek more. And I think he has the effort as well behind it. And when you put that all together, it is this package that is just bound for greatness no matter where it's going.
So obviously we talk a lot about wine, but actually not that much. I mean, there's a lot of tips and tricks that he gives us. He gives us secret things to make you look like an expert in wine when you're showing up to your next party, and also what to do when you're at a very expensive restaurant. But also we talk a lot about the process of making the show, the details of travel, just the hard work, all these things. We talk about passion a lot, the things that drive us in life.
Which is a huge thing that's in every glass of good wine. You have a passion, you have a story, and I think that's what we uncover in this episode.
So I hope you enjoy this lovely interview with V is for Vino. Welcome to the show, Vince. We're so excited to have you on. For those of you who don't know, V is for Vino. Vince, basically, we met him by sliding into his DMs because we watched some of his content online, and we were just so enthralled by it and amazed. And it has just gotten so good. I mean, we watched it a few years ago, and your episodes now are like professional level stuff. You've got animation, the history. They're hour longs, and they just fly by. It's so entertaining. So, well, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Well, likewise, you flatter me, but you guys make amazing content. I don't know if I had found you before we started talking, but then I got in a rabbit hole of all your stuff, and very similar. You guys do amazing stuff too. So don't sell yourself short.
Aw, thanks, Vince. Yeah, we actually found Vince on his show on YouTube, V is for Vino. This was a few years ago. Scott was right. We slid into his DMs because we thought, oh my gosh, what a creative, fantastic guy. We're learning so much. We just want to meet you. We want to say hi. Thanks for doing what you do. And then we just started talking and spitballing about, life and wine and travel, of course, some of our shared passions. But tell us about how you got into the world of wine and a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah. So I started this show back in 2016. I can't believe I'm saying that in 2025. Time goes quick. I had an idea because I had taken my certified sommelier exam. And for those who don't know what that is, when you start learning about wine, there's a couple institutions that actually have certifications and tests that you can take. I did the Court of Master Sommeliers, but there's a couple. WSET is the other big one. And I was working in restaurants and working in bars at the time in Los Angeles. I actually was trying to be a rock star, but there's a lot of people who want to do that. I don't know if you knew that, but that's a very competitive field and involves a lot of luck. And so I was also paying my way in bars and restaurants. And I had always been around restaurants anyway. My parents owned a restaurant in Cleveland. I paid my way through college by working in restaurants. And one of the catalysts actually was in my college restaurant. They wouldn't promote me to server because I didn't have wine knowledge. And then when I went to go look for the wine knowledge, I didn't know where to go. This was even really before Instagram was huge. There was Gary V in front of the webcam talking about wine, but nobody was really like educating you the way I wanted when I was looking for information. So flash forward, I'm working in restaurants. I want to take the certified sommelier exam. I go do it with Court of Masters. And while it was a good experience for me because it was very study intensive and really, flashcards and kind of a year of my life of just intense studying, I looked at it and I said, this isn't what an average consumer would want to do. People like you like wine, you're into wine, you like travel, but you don't want to sit there with a book and flashcards. You would like to probably watch something akin to, a travel show or something like that, because as you know, if you get into wine, wine is all about the place it comes from. And it's not just this bottle singular on your table. It's the history behind it. It's the terroir behind it. It's the food that pairs with it. And it's the people who make it. It's all kind of the culture wrapped into a bottle. And that's what's cool about wine. And so I had this idea to make this TV show that would take you to the places that the wine came from, give you some rough education, high level education, and even some detailed education if you want it. There's a lot of information packed in our episodes. And then show you the food and the people and everything around the wine. And so that was the catalyst for the show.
And what was the first leap? What was the first episode that you did?
The first season was all California. I was in Los Angeles. So I wanted to, we only had so much money. I kind of bootstrapped the whole thing. I saved up money from the bartending gig to pay the crew and learn how to edit and all that in that first year. So the first episode was Santa Barbara. And actually, if you go, that episode's still out there. You can go watch it. You can see the difference in what we do now. It's not a bad episode, but you can see the difference. I'm sure you look at your old stuff very similarly.
yeah, it's very cringy no matter what. But you got to have the cringe to get to start somewhere today. Yeah.
No, you have to be a little unwilling to, put some stuff out there. And what's funny is I actually didn't envision it totally as a wine show at the start. I wanted to create a kind of like a wine education course that happened to have video attached. But what happened was I was going to try and sell wine, and selling wine in this country is really difficult because of something called the 3-tier system. It's a way that basically allows you not to ship wine from state to state. So I learned that one, selling wine was going to be really hard. And two, after I made these first videos, Santa Barbara, Napa, and Paso Robles, the first 3 that I made, they kind of got some good traction. And I was like, okay, this is where there's a desire for this. And I don't really have the capital or the knowledge to navigate the wine sales component. So we just kind of ventured further into the TV show component of it. But I got basically a couple of my buddies. I was bartending with a guy who was like, I'm starting to get into film work and camera work. And I had this idea. And so we teamed up. And we did the first episode. I mean, Santa Barbara, we filmed in like 1.5 days, maybe, or 2 days. And we almost didn't sleep. I think we slept for like 4 hours that night that we did it because we didn't have any money. We just had to go back to Santa Barbara. It's a 2-hour drive from LA and back down on our days off. I mean, now our shoots, for perspective, are 6 days, 7 days. And, it was a wildly different type of shoot than what we do now, but we got it done.
I love it.
This
I love
is
that.
wild.
That bootstrapping. I mean, that's really what you got to do. You got to get out there and just make it work.
But I find it so fascinating that your vision was not the TV show. I mean, initially it was the Rockstar, then it was the Somm, then it was to sell wine, and here you are now, kind of doing all of it in one. You could say the wine Rockstar.
Well, I have this phrase. I didn't make it up. I'm sure I heard it somewhere, but good will be good. And I kind of live my life by that, which is if you put good out and you go into something with good intentions, it won't necessarily lead to where you think it's going to lead. I thought I was going to be a rock star, but it will lead to something that is good at the end. Because I was paying my way and I didn't succeed at playing music in Los Angeles, that led me to the wine space. And so that was how I got to where I am today. And so I thoroughly believe that even if Vias Vino hadn't worked out, like that learning process would have led to something else amazing too. And I'm very, very big on entrepreneurship, going after your dreams, being unafraid to take risks. we're lucky that we live in a time and a place that rewards risk taking and rewards, out of the box thinking, and it rewards you have the ability to do things that we couldn't do even 20 years ago. The drone shots that I get with a $400 drone and my crew used to need a helicopter and a $20,000 budget, so we're in an amazing time, and I really like to encourage people to take advantage of it.
And the distribution is free.
That too. I mean, what would I have done with this show? Even if I could have made the show, which I couldn't have 20 years ago, what do I do with it? Right?
Yeah.
I would have to go get a network to pick me up. Now I have an outlet for people literally around the world to see it. And that was one of the coolest things as we started growing. I mean, we have a lot of American fans, but I have people reaching out from everywhere, from Africa to Thailand to Australia. I mean, it's really global, and that's an amazing thing.
There's so many things, but one thing I want to ask is, do you feel like you are able to fulfill your Rockstar needs with this pursuit?
A little bit, but I do miss. That's a New Year's resolution of mine, is to get back to playing a little bit of music, because there is part of it for sure. Like, it fills the creative hole, that what I'm doing is kind of in a creative world. Though, as you know, even a creative space, you're managing probably 80% business, 20% creative.
Yeah.
You guys, I'm sure it's very similar. Like, at the end of the day, you still got to pay the bills. And I spend a lot of my time either on sales calls, or some of the editing process can be a bit tedious, the distribution, the marketing, things like that. I try and stay grateful that I have the opportunity to do it, that, the alternative. I always try and remember the alternative. Like, the alternative would be me working a job I don't want to work. So anytime I get in that hole. So it does scratch a creative itch, but I do miss music is the short answer. I'm going to probably try and play more in 2025.
Because I realize your music and your videos is timed so well. So I can tell you have a love of music that is like even your intro is just like, you get that, I forget, the sizzle or whatever that like, it's right after you, Via's for Vino, bam. And then like you go into the next thing. It's like you build, and I can tell your love of music comes through the actual episode.
I actually spend a lot of time on the music, picking it in the episodes. Some of them are friends or local bands. So like that band you mentioned is called Steady Flow. They're here in Illinois. They're awesome. They're a funk band for my intro. They're like our theme music. But then I literally give myself a day in the editing process to just go through music. Either it's usually on Artlist lately, just because I have a lot of music I needed. I used to try and get all local artists, but I started needing like 15, 20 songs per episode, and it became a little much to do that. But I still feature local artists when we can, or I'll spend a whole day, because I think the vibe of each episode is important. Like I make a conscious effort. The Lebanon episode, for instance, was an important one to me. I spent a day finding some music that either had some Arabic influence or there was some emotional scenes. And so I spent some time finding that, because it really sets the tone. And some people will be like, oh, why don't you just, the music can sometimes be a little distracting if you don't mix it well. And people are like, why don't you just put no music? I was like, you don't understand. When you put no music, it's really dead. It needs that soul,
Yeah, you can tell. I mean, I could tell that you put a lot of time and effort into the music selection and timing and everything to it. So
yeah, thank you.
Great.
So maybe it'll be original music in a future season.
That's the goal, actually. That's a little secret goal of mine. If I ever record again, even if it's just like in the credits or something, maybe one day.
What a great place to test it all out, too.
Yeah.
And how long is your edit of an episode?
Oh my gosh, so long. That's the process. that's the sauce. Like the filming is quick comparatively. We spend a lot of time planning the filming. So we basically start a year in advance from an episode, starting talking to the regions. Once we lock everything in, like, okay, we're going to go here. You have to book the crew and the logistics and the travel and the dates and the wineries and the restaurants and everything you're going to do. Then we film. That usually takes about 6 to 7 days now for an episode of film days. So about a week. And then the editing process, it's usually about 6 months from filming to release. If I only had one edit to focus on, it would probably be a 6-week to 2-month edit. But I'm also doing other things. We're filming other episodes. We're still running the business and our VIP club. We're doing other stuff. So it's a lot of hours. Luckily now I have my wife with me full time, and she's been helping.
Oh, congrats! Because I think when we first spoke, seems like 3 years ago, but it's probably longer than that.
It was maybe about that. Yeah.
Yeah, you were in the process of deciding. So congratulations on making the full leap.
Thank you. That was a recent thing, and it's been, as I'm sure you guys learned, it's kind of a learning curve of working together full time versus like, hey, helping out on the side. We've had to do that over the last few months, especially we just released 2 episodes, and we were really involved in that and finding our groove, but so grateful that we are able to do it. It was kind of, my first goal was just like, I wanted to just make it and see where it went. Maybe I'll get picked up by a network. And then it became, well, it'd be cool if I could work on this full time. And then it became, well, how cool would it be if my wife could work on it full time with me and she didn't have to work, her day job. And so all those things have come true. So now the rest is just gravy. Like, I'm so happy. Everything else now is just bonus.
I look at like what we're able to do, and it's like working together. People are like, how do you guys do that? And it's like, well, it does require a lot of work. Like, but the alternative is like, would you rather work with your wife or like go to a 9 to 5 and not really get to choose who you work with?
Some people might have a different answer.
That's true.
You never know.
I think you nailed it on the head, though. I say this all the time. It's like, what's the alternative? Like, it's that, you've heard the choose your hard thing. It's like working for somebody else is hard. Working for yourself is hard. Right. Which would you rather do? I'd rather build something that I own, that me and my wife own, that's building our future together, that gives us the freedom where I don't have to, if I don't want to wake up at 6 a.m. and drive to an office and clock in, I have that ability. So there's like over the last few months, for instance, we had a really tough couple months with trying to get these episodes out, and I was working some nights till, 1, 2 a.m. But I'd rather do that than the alternative.
Right. And to create together is such a beautiful thing. So I'm glad you're able to do that. Congratulations.
Yeah, and she should get more credit she's not in front of the camera, so I think people, she doesn't get as much of the over the top like credit for the episodes, but she's not only behind the scenes with me, but she is on set with me, and she makes sure like I stay perky and ask the right questions, and when the interview's cut, she's like, make sure you ask this. She's in the creative process, like she's there from start to finish of it, so I give her so much credit for so much of what V is for Vino has become.
She sounds like a great producer. What's her name?
Lisa.
We're giving you credit.
You see behind the camera right now saying, keep smiling. Yeah. Cled is very good at that. She's the producer. I'm the one who's like, okay, I did it. And she's like, okay, now next time, maybe smile a little bit. We are having fun. And it's like, oh yeah, okay.
Oh, that's totally Lisa. Yeah, we should do another take. She has no problem telling me we need to do another take.
Yeah. You make a good team.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your creative process when you're going through this, because I remember listening to Anthony Bourdain's creative process talking about planning a travel show. So much happens on the spot that you can't plan for. And he would always write his voiceover after they filmed. What is your process like in terms of, because you have great voiceover, you tell an amazing story. What's the scripting process like? What's the storytelling process like for you?
Yeah, good question. I do write most of my voiceover after. So people, I think a lot of who aren't kind of in film, they think that we show up and we just turn on cameras. But it's much more structured than that, because to make it look good, we've got, in an interview, we've got 4 cameras rolling. We have to kind of time when we're saying start and go.
Is it 2 of you?
No. So I have a crew too. And yeah, so Lisa is one of them, and it's usually at least 2 others, if not 3 others. The same guy, my buddy Rio, who I worked with in the first episode, we still work together. So, which is pretty cool. He's now full-time doing film. He does film and work for other people too, but he comes on our shoots too. But anyway, we start with the planning process of, okay, what conceptually do we want to say? I always say, okay, if people walk away with just a couple core messages about this region, what is it? Loire, I wanted them to know, for instance, by the end of the episode, I was like, I want them to know this is my favorite wine region, because it is. I want them to know that it's super diverse and affordable. And I want them to have like a kind of love affair with the beauty of the region. Like I start with those 3 North Stars when I'm writing and I'm envisioning an episode and when we plan our segments. So I'll say, okay, those are the core themes. I'll write a rough script. Anything that is fact driven, like the segments with the wine where I'm spitting out facts and statistics, that's all written in advance just because I need to fact check it. And then I write rough voiceover. We go film. Then I come back, and when we get in the editing bay, we cut our interviews along the lines of those core themes. Because what the hardest part of the job, people ask me, what's the hardest part of the job? The hardest part of the job is taking an hour-long interview with a winemaker and cutting it down to 6 minutes. Because there's so much amazing content in that. And for the show, we just have only so much time per winemaker. And so I use those, I go back to those North Stars. It's like, okay, does it feed into these core themes of the episode? Or is it something that is cool, but doesn't really help move the plot forward? Just like you would a fiction piece, right? Like, does this move the plot forward or no? And then the last thing I'll kind of do is write that voiceover. And that's where I can really bring in some of the emotional ties, especially in what we've started doing now. I call them motif segments. They're little 1 to 2 minute segments in between the interviews and the factual segments. And they're areas where we can bring in some of the emotion. And then I always have the most fun with the outro, the last scene of the episode. I spend a ton of time on that voiceover because that's where we can like bring it home and kind of you can walk away with some sort of message, whatever that message may be. So, and also too, I can't write that until after I've experienced the region and felt the things, you know?
Right.
And where did you get this knowledge of storytelling? Because you're putting what seem probably in your mind simple thoughts, but they're very complex ideas that someone who's not in the storytelling realm wouldn't understand. Where'd you learn all this?
And to a very complex subject for the average Joe, I think.
No, thank you. Honestly, I couldn't tell you that. I think I just speak. I try and ask myself when I get back, sometimes even that day after I get back or on the plane, I'll just jot down like what were my honest feelings? What were my honest reactions from the region? And then I just try and kind of put it in words. I wish I had a more, I didn't do any formal course around it. I've always, kind of enjoyed, good film and good TV, but I didn't like study it or read books on it or anything like that. It's just something that evolved. And that's another one too, where if you look at the early episodes, you look at the Paso episode and there's not this at all, by the way. Like there's no real, it was a good episode, but there's not really like a core, like emotional component. And Lisa makes fun of me because my last scene, I just wanted to show these cool elephant seals that are on the coast in San Luis Obispo. Had nothing to do with wine, had nothing to do with any episode. And there's no voiceover. I just go, these guys have the right idea, and I point to the elephant seals. We'll see you later. And that's the end of the episode. And it doesn't, there's no cohesive. So I've definitely come a long way with that too as we've continued to make episodes.
You've evolved with the show.
Yeah.
You should. That's good.
We've had a few elephant seal scenes.
Yeah, that's what we should call it.
Yeah,
It's like, what were we thinking there?
Yeah. Well, I think, I know we've made mistakes over the years, and you have to, and there's content you make, and you want to show it, and then you realize, like, that was just self-serving. Like, I put that video or that whatever in the episode because I wanted to see it. And then once you realize, like, oh, I have to create for the audience and the viewer, you got to kill your babies and you got to cut stuff out and you kind of change the story a little bit. So
I'm not romantic about anything anymore. Like if it doesn't work with the story, I cut it. I used to be, but you have to just get to that point. Our shoots too have gotten so big and we've got so much great stuff that like only the best of the best can go in the final edit. If it doesn't help move the narrative forward, if it doesn't provide new information, that's another thing. Like if anything's repetitive, it usually gets cut. Like if I've said this in another scene, gets cut. You really have to be like, I'm cutting, like you said, kill your babies, if you will. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we haven't even touched wine. This is like an episode of people like, I'm going to learn about wine. We haven't even touched wine.
You're right.
What's been your most memorable location?
Yeah, there's a lot, but I would say the Lebanon episode. If you watch that one, because I'm half Lebanese, I got to bring my brother on this trip. He had never been out of the country. There's a scene at the end where I actually get to meet some family who live in Lebanon. It was a really powerful, emotional episode. And in general, too, telling that story, I mean, the Lebanese people have been through so much. Their country has been through so much, and so many of them are just trying to, make wine and, have a good living in life for their family. And so there was a lot going on in that episode, and that was a really challenging story to tell. That edit was the hardest edit I ever did, because deciding how to do that and do it justice, because our show is fun, and there's parts of that aren't fun. And so balancing that and telling their story through a lens of kind of levity and hope, while also bringing in the emotional component of my family being there, that was my favorite episode we've done so far. And the food and the culture and the landscape is amazing. Everybody thinks Lebanon's a desert. It's actually no desert at all. It's all mountains or coastline. That's it. It's the only country in the Middle East with no desert, so it's really beautiful there. So that was a fun experience.
That sounds amazing.
When did you get to shoot that episode?
Right before everything kind of happened with the Israel-Gaza conflict, literally the week before. If we had gone another week later, it might not have ever happened, because I had tried to make this episode happen for years. And then finally we got it done. And then we come home, and literally 3-4 days later, everything kind of happened in the Middle East. So we were really lucky.
Wow.
It's
hard to follow up on that one.
Yeah, I'm glad you got to go.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was I'll just mention one more thing. It was just a cool experience, because none of my family had ever been either. None of them had ventured back since my great-grandparents emigrated here to America. And so what we did in April was we had a big old, kind of like a launch party for the episode with all my family, and there was like 100 of us. It was basically like a wedding without the pressure of a wedding, and it was a crazy experience. Obviously, it was fun, but some of my family members, like my great aunts, like broke down in tears to me after the screening, because it was something that they never experienced. Well, they're a bit older now; they're probably never going to experience it, and so there was a bit of a gift component to like being able to give that to them. And I say in the episode, if I never filmed another episode, this was cool enough. If I got to go back to a day job right now, like, this episode was cool enough for the whole thing to have been worth it.
Wait, you did a whole release in front of your family with this episode. How did that feel? Was that, to go from, hey, I just want to maybe create some content about wine, to doing something that's so impactful? Like, what were you feeling before you hit play in front of everyone?
Yeah, there's been some pinch me moments along the way. I'm sure there is with you, that you're living the dream. And I try and always remember that, that feeling like, oh my gosh, I've made it, quote unquote, which is funny, because when I was trying to be a rock star, I was like, oh, I'm going to make it one day. I never made it. And so there's this feeling of like, oh, I have what I want. Like, I'm not a billionaire, but I can live the life I want. I can do, amazing thing. I can help people. Our mission, I haven't even gotten into this, but the real mission of the show isn't for Vince to go travel around the world. And I've probably done a bad job describing that in this podcast. But my mission of the show was to provide free, accessible wine education, because I didn't think that existed out there. All the education was a barrier to entry of, expensive courses that you couldn't afford. The only reason I could afford them was because my hotel that I was working for paid for them for me. And there's people around the world, or people just getting into their careers, who we've helped, and they'll come up to me and say, thank you. Your show helped me when I got this new job. I had no idea what I was doing. And then I found your show, and we were able to kind of help people in their wine journeys. And so that's the really kind of pinch me moment back to that, is when we're actually helping people, can
That's
pursue
amazing.
their dreams. Yeah.
Let's say someone is just, scratch the itch of their love of wine. Where would you recommend they go? Is there some episodes that you recommend, or there's some books or some tools? How would you guide someone if the 2025 is the year that they want to learn about wine? Where should they start?
Yeah, so our library of content is great, and there's a bunch of other amazing creators as well. Book-wise, I usually say start with Wine Folly, and then Madeline Paquette wrote that, and she's actually on our Walla Walla episode, and she's amazing. It's kind of like an infographic wine book. It's just really digestible. And then the Wine Bible. Those are like my 2 starter books. There's more you can get into, but those are good starter books if you're trying to get into it. If you're trying to watch video content, Madeline also makes video content in addition to me. My friend Matthew Horkey makes great content. Constantine Baum makes great content. If you're starting with our episodes, you could start anywhere. The nice thing is that they're kind of standalone. I always say France is the Beatles of the wine world. They may not be like the best, depending on who you're talking to and what your opinions are, but they are the OG. Like they were at all the places in the world emulate what the French did. In California, what they do in Napa is what's called a Bordeaux blend. A Bordeaux blend originated in Bordeaux. So I would say starting with France is never a bad idea when you're learning about wine, because that theory can kind of be taken everywhere. But on the same token, only sticking to France, Italy, Spain, and is kind of Eurocentric. And the world of wine is cool because it's everywhere. And there's amazing wines being made in places like South Africa. South America has amazing wines. Eastern Europe, places like Hungary, places obviously in the Middle East. I mentioned Lebanon and Eurasia. Georgia is another one, the oldest winemaking country in the world. Australia, New Zealand. So my number one advice is actually to go to a wine shop when you start searching for wine. Stop going to wine from the grocery store, because the grocery stores, especially in America, going back to that 3-tier system, you're given the illusion of choice. There's a lot of wines on the shelf. They're almost all owned by the same company. They're almost all ubiquitous because they're meant not to offend, because the grocery stores don't want to do anything too off the beaten path, because then you'll return it, maybe not buy it. The fun stuff, the small batch stuff with heart by small producers and from places you may not know, because that's the other thing. The grocery stores are probably 80% California. You have to go to a wine shop. If it's a large wine shop, great. If it's a small wine shop, local, even better.
And let's say, do you have any tips? Let's say like you want to impress a host. Do you have any guidance? You got like $20-$30, like, or whatever you think your budget might be. What would you recommend? Someone's inviting us over and I want to impress them with my knowledge or a selection of wine.
Sure. So all people who are into wine usually like traditional method sparkling wine. The most famous example is champagne, but champagne is expensive. Champagne is kind of like paying for a Gucci purse. You're paying for the brand name a little bit. So you can actually get traditional method wine. So it's made in the same way champagne is made, at a much better value from other regions. In France, it's what's called Cremant. It looks like Cremant. Cremant de Bourgogne, which is Cremant from Burgundy, France, is made from the exact grapes as champagne, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and made in the same method, traditional method, made in similar soils, in similar climates, and it's like half the cost. So you can get a killer bottle of Cremant for $30. You could also go to Loire. They make Cremant there, or anywhere else in France. You could get a great bottle of vintage cava, not grocery store cava, which is fine for certain occasions, but a vintage cava, like a Reserva or Grand Reserva cava, has, again, very similar quality levels of champagne at about a quarter the price, even cheaper than the French stuff. And what's cool about these wines is they pair with everything. So if you're in a situation where you're coming to a dinner party, it pairs with everything on the table. The bubbles and the acid act like a palate cleanser. So the same reason we drink Perrier with nice meals, because of the bubbles, and it acts, every bite then tastes fresh after you take a sip of the sparkling water. It's the same effect with the champagne. So like there's better pairings with champagne, but nothing's going to be a bad pairing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's
great
perfect.
tip.
Yeah, I love that tip. I really would have thought you would have gone somewhere else. But
Yeah, I
did
was like,
not.
oh, Pinot Noir. Or we're gonna go.
And we were able to go to Champagne, and I had a theory, and it unfortunately was proven true, which is most, like, it's the same thing you just said about the grocery store, but in Champagne, or I should say in the world of Champagne, when you go buy it, it's all owned by the same company. It's all owned by like LVMH. All of the major brands that you see are all the same company. And when we went to Champagne, you saw those brands and you're wowed by the big houses, but we also got to taste some of the smaller ones. And then it kind of like, I realized like I don't love the champagne that's in the store anymore because I want to find the smaller ones because it's got more character.
And you find that at a small wine shop.
Yes.
Yeah, we were able to do a side-by-side tasting, kind of. We did a large producer in the morning and a small producer in the afternoon. It was an incredible, I mean, Scott tasted because I was about 6 weeks pregnant being the DD, but surprise, you're going to Champagne and you're pregnant.
And Burgundy.
Yeah, and Burgundy. Yeah, that was the trip that we had booked. But we brought all those home and tasted it once I gave birth. But
Yes.
I digress. But yes, just to have that small producer, there was such depth to those, the taste of that small producer champagne. Whereas now I almost feel like a snob saying like, oh, Veuve, or another one is, yeah, it's good, but I really want the small producer. There's something there. There's also, it's almost like you can taste a story there.
This holds true for every wine region. Again, going back to how important it is to find a small wine shop, or at the very least, a designated wine shop rather than the grocery store in your town, because the grocery stores have to carry these brands that can be carried across 10 stores, 15 stores, 20 stores regionally. If you want those wines with character and integrity and story and also different flavors, like fun, exciting flavors, not, that's why you have to go to these smaller shops. And I'm not saying spend more money, by the way. That's, people get that conflated, like, oh, you have to spend a bunch of money. Not true at all. Just find those smaller producers and you'll get better experiences.
Do you have any favorite small producer champagnes?
Yeah. So it's like the grower, non-grower. So what you were describing is called a grower champagne. Grower means they kind of grow and all the fruit, whereas these big houses, they contract and they buy a lot of the fruit. And so Vimar, Vilmar, EC, they're like the in between. They're able to be found in a lot of places, and they are some of the best kind of medium-sized champagne you can find. I also like Pierre Peters. This isn't a big house, but it's, again, a medium house, so you might be able to find it. I'm trying to find ones you might find in your local market. Pierre Peters makes incredible champagne at a price, like, it's the same price as Veuve, but I mean, it just blows it out of the water, in my opinion. And I'm like, why would you pay $50 for the orange label when you would pay same price and get Pierre Peters, which will blow your mind? So those are two favorites.
Okay. Do you have a like memorable glass of wine, location, or that like sticks out, or a top three? I don't know.
Yeah, sure. I'll do a top couple. I mentioned Lebanon, so I'll shy away
Lebanon
from
would
that.
come out.
Yeah, but I'll shy away from it since I already talked it up. But you should watch the episode because I talk about it in the episode specifically.
Well, can you tell us what was the actual wine that you had, and like what was the type of wine in Lebanon?
Well, here's the fun thing about actually some of all my favorite wines is that I don't know what they are. So that one, that one was not the way you're thinking. That one was up on top of a mountain in the Bekaa Valley with my my family. We were having like a cookout together with all the extended family, and he brought out a bottle of his own homemade wine. So like, I don't even know what grape it was. Didn't have a label on it. It was just his wine, right? And that's one of those things where wine is special because of the moments you're in with it. You can't plan for those moments. Sometimes it just happens. Another favorite glass of mine I always like to say is, I don't know what it is. It was when I was studying abroad in Europe and I went to Bordeaux with a family that I knew, French family, and they brought me into their home. And I told them I was kind of into wine. I mean, I was a college kid. I didn't know much. And they brought out some insane Bordeaux bottle from their cellar that I remember was a big deal, but I couldn't tell you what it is. So these are like, that's the kind of the fun thing about wine is I've spent money on the premier wines, the blue chip wines that are supposed to give you this feeling and the sensation, and they haven't delivered. And I've had wines that are in special moments that have, are the ones that you remember and you don't even really care what the wine was because you remember the moment. And that's kind of the magic of wine. I always say what's really cool is, to me, music, like sound and smell, are two things that really tie to memories really easily. Like I can't remember, as you start to get older, you start to have trouble remembering certain things. But there's like, if I smell something specific, it'll take me back to a place instantly. And same thing with like a music. If I was listening to it during a specific time of my life, music can do that for me too. So it has this like strong correlation with memory. And I think that's one of the really cool things about wine.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, some of our favorite wines we haven't known because it'll be like be in Italy and be like, just bring out the house wine, and you don't even know what it is.
But it's the people you're sitting with. It's the food you're eating it with. It's the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, it's the limoncello that the owner brings out afterwards that like tops it off. Things like that you have no idea what's going on, and you're like, sure, I have the grappa, and it's memorable.
Yeah, like we were recently in Greece and we stayed at a kind of resort-ish place, which I don't do often because I find that it's like, you don't get the authentic experience. But we were like, let's just do a relaxing thing at a resort. Sure enough, all the resort meals were kind of meh. We went out for like 1 or 2 nights and we went to the little Greek spot on the corner, and the owner brought me back to the back room of the bar and poured some of his random fruit brandy that he's making back there. And like, that was the experience I remembered, not the luxury resort that we paid way too much for and should have probably just stayed in Airbnb and gone to the local stuff. It was the guy in the tiny little restaurant who had a story and some passion behind what he was doing. And that always rings true. I'm sure you know that by now.
Well, yes, but you forget it because, like you said, I was going to say passion. You said it. When you find someone who has a passion and you can pick up on it, and it doesn't take much, it just takes like you found the owner and you probably ask him a few questions, and he's probably been asked those questions before, or maybe not, but he realized you actually took interest in what he was doing and wanted to listen. He's probably had thousands of tourists who come in and demand the food, or I'll take a glass of wine, and then just brush him off. You were curious. And as soon as you add some of that curiosity, people want to share their passions. And that's when they invite you into their life, and they show you everything. And that's part of the reason why you travel. That's why you go experience those things to have those amazing experiences.
Have you had a country or an area that you found they're more likely to happen in? Because I have.
Yeah, definitely Italy.
Yeah.
You will be invited everywhere. Greece is one of them as well. And a surprising one, I think just because I didn't have much knowledge about the country, was Slovenia. We had such an amazing welcoming experience in Slovenia, and the wine was incredible and the food was amazing. And there weren't many tourists, and it was just such a unique and surprising experience. And I think our expectations also had something to do with that. I had no idea what to expect. Sometimes you go into a vacation with high expectations. Oh, this is going to be the best wine because I'm going to Tuscany or because I'm going to Napa. And sometimes that impacts you in a negative way. I think we had an open mind. We were curious and we didn't know what to expect. And it was one of the most memorable wine vacations that we've ever had.
You nailed on the head. So Greece was one I was going to say. Those people, man, they just are so over the top kind. It really is wild. Again, you have to kind of leave. You can't go to Santorini Resort or Mykonos Resort. Even then, the people are nice. But like, if you get out and you meet the people at the local restaurants and wineries or what have you, I found that Greece is similar to that kind of hospitality.
Yeah.
Well, what's next on the Vias for Vino agenda? What's 2025 hold? I mean, I know you definitely have projects in the hopper that are coming up, considering you said that you work on them for a year sometimes. But
Yeah,
do you
not
have
as
any?
many as I would like. Sometimes that happens, as you know. We're trying to get to some places that What I've found is that some of the European places are easier to put together than places in other places of the world, regions in other places of the world. But the more I do this, the more I want to go to the other places in the world. So I'm really focusing on a few specific locations that we haven't got to, and I don't have anything locked in yet, but I'm hoping we can get to either Australia or New Zealand, one of the two. I really want to get to South Africa. I really want to do more in South America. The one we have locked in, I don't even like to say locked in yet because we're still in final talks, but I'm confident enough to say it's happening, is Georgia, actually, the country of Georgia. So that should be filming in April, and that I'm excited for because that is the oldest winemaking country in the world, and there's a lot of interesting modern stuff they're doing too. So they have these really old historic winemaking techniques. Orange wine is basically the one that they're known for, but they also do a lot of regular wine, red wine and white wine from indigenous grapes and exciting things there. And I think the food and I think that area is going to surprise people. Like, I don't think people know what to expect. I haven't been. So a lot of times people are experiencing the region with me. I try and, like, when we turn on the camera, sometimes I'll be like, I'll have to tell my interviewees or like if the chef's cooking, I was like, let's not talk too much or don't show me too much or don't tell me what's going to happen before it happens because I want the reaction to be genuine on camera. So Georgia will be one of those episodes where the audience experiences it with me because I have never been and I don't really know what to expect. So I think that'll be a cool one.
I'm excited to see it. I think something that I love about watching your episodes is that wine can be an intimidating world, even for someone that travels a lot and reads a lot. There's sometimes a barrier to entry, or there could be like a thought that it's pretentious. You distill it down in such a digestible way that makes, and I think you write this in your bio, like you can teach the average Joe about this world of wine. And I think what you're doing with all of these new destinations is really fantastic because places like Georgia might not have the PR budget that a place like Napa does, but people are curious and they want to try new things and they want to try different wines. So I'm excited to see what's next in store for you.
Yeah, and those regions too tend to have a lot of value if you're getting into wine. Like they're not, because they don't have that cachet of their name, they are priced lower on wine menus and in wine stores. So if you're first getting into wine, like these are fun wines to explore. I try and do a healthy balance because I do like a lot from those big blue chip famous regions. Those are fun too. But I always say the world of wines is too big to drink Napa Chardonnay your whole life. Like you have to venture out. It's just too exciting.
When you go to a nice restaurant, I'm curious, this is like my own itch I'm going to scratch here. Do you actually like, we go to like a nice restaurant, I'm so turned off by the wine in a way, like, because we'll go and we've been fortunate to, go to some nice regions and you're like, oh, because I can remember we first learned about Saint Emilion and we went to this really nice restaurant. We're like, let's get a Saint Emilion. And we opened up the wine list and we're like, nope, we're definitely not getting a Saint Emilion. Because like
once we were out of the region, you mean?
When we were out of the region, we were in LA at this really nice Italian restaurant, and like the minimum
ordering a French wine,
minimum like Saint Emilion was like $250. And we're like, okay, nope, not getting that. Do you find yourself when you're going out to nice restaurants like not wanting to drink the wine because you can get it for such a cheaper price, or do you like to play the game and navigate like, oh, I know this is a good one for a good price?
I have lots of thoughts on this, and I have some tips. So,
okay.
Yeah. So remember I mentioned earlier the 3-tier system. That is also the culprit for this issue in America. When you go to an Italy or France, and you're like, oh my gosh, all these bottles are $20 to $30, euro, whatever, on the menu, and that same bottle in America is 70, 80 on a menu. There's so many reasons that is. There's a lot. Our healthcare costs and things are kind of built into the prices on the menu, right? There's other things that are built into that. Our cost of labor is more expensive, but the number one culprit is the 3-tier system jacking up the price. More hands are mandated by law to touch that bottle before it gets to your final destination. So that's a big one. The other one is that in most other countries, especially in Europe, they treat wine as food, which means they subsidize it. They encourage it. They help the farmers. In America, we treat it like perfume or a purse. We treat it as a luxury good. We tax the hell out of it, and they don't support the people who grow it. And so you end up with a final product that, yes, is way too expensive on a restaurant menu. So honestly, I don't order a lot of wine at restaurants unless they have things that I can either find that are of value or they have things that I can't get other places. I can't stomach spending 3 times the price as it is in my home cellar. So when I go out, I oftentimes have things that I can't do at home. Like if they have a good cocktail program, which a lot of places have great cocktail programs and horrible wine programs. I've never understood that. But if they have a good cocktail program or beer program, I'll lean towards that and I'll save the wine. But if I am doing wine in a restaurant, there's a couple things. If they have a good list, I'll spend. I'll spend a lot of money on a bottle of wine if they have things I can't get. That usually means they have a cellar and they have old vintages of things and they actually stock things. Most places, and that's an expensive thing to do, you have to be at the right restaurant, because most places, they don't want to hold inventory. But if you go to a place that has a large cellar, they have vintages of things dating back into the early 2000s or the 90s. I can't go buy that in a store. I'll buy that at the restaurant, even if it's expensive. So that's one area where I'll explore. But that's because I like old wines and I know a bit. If I was just walking in and I wanted to find some value on a wine list, I always say go to the other section. So skip Napa, skip Tuscany, skip Bourgogne, go to the other section where you've got, 6 different countries that they didn't have a category for in the rest of the region, because that's where you'll find the best value.
Oh, great. I
That's
love
a
these
great
tips.
tip.
This has been amazing. This has been so enlightening and fun.
I know I'm going to have to listen back in a few months after I have this baby so I can enjoy some wine.
Yeah, huge congratulations, by the way. I followed along with the journey.
Oh, thank you.
We could probably get into a whole rabbit hole on France, because if I've spent anywhere, I've spent the most time in France. I've done 5 episodes in France now. I also lived in France for 6 months in college. So if anybody understands kind of some of the French hurdles you were dealing with while you were there, I would be one of them. Plus, I do business with them. They just have a mindset that's a little different. Not good or bad, but I think challenging for an American to get used to if you didn't grow up with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
That's a good way to say
it's a different. It's not good or bad. It's just different.
Yes.
Yes.
I honestly think that. I'm not saying that to be politically correct. Yeah. I honestly think it's not good or bad. I think it's just, if you grew up one way, it would take some real getting used to get to adjust to that lifestyle the way they live. And there's a lot of ways in which it's better, as you know, right? Like there's a lot of amazing parts about French culture. Like they know how to enjoy life, and so much more than we do in their off time. They take a lot of off time. I can't tell you how many times I've been working to plan a French episode, and I've emailed them and they're like, we're out next week. And I'm like, weren't you out like a week ago? And that's an area where they really excel compared to us, where we work ourselves to death. So there's a lot of great things, but I have to imagine managing living there was an adjustment.
It was, but and I think, not being pregnant, it'd be a different time. Mm-hmm. But for this time of life, we just decided, hey, it's not going to work for us. But you're right. There's so many things that we observed and learned that we're like, we love that. There's so many pieces that we love. That one of the things I wish we had is the slower pace of life and enjoying meals with friends and family, because it was so common that everyone, when you would eat lunch, you'd just see everyone just having lunch together. Construction workers, like white collar workers, everyone's sitting down and having a proper meal. And there is the idea of like, oh, I'm going to grab and go, doesn't really exist there. Like it exists for like tourists and foreigners, not really for the French.
Yeah, I can't imagine a French person, eating at their desk for lunch. Like that.
I mean, when we're filming, we're like trying to get so much in during the daylight. And so I'm so used to an American lunch of like, oh, we can grab a sandwich, eat, and then keep rolling. Every time we go to France, it's like, I'm having, like Lisa, as the producer's trying to push, like we're so behind schedule because we took an hour and a half lunch break because that's the only option.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You try to sit down and be like, I'll order. And they're like, oh, take your time. What's the rush?
So yeah, there's and you know, you kind of nailed it on the head where there's so many things you want to take. My secret mission of the show. So my stated mission is wine education accessible to anybody, any background, any income level. That's number one. But my secret mission is to get people to travel more, because and I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me and been like, I never would have put Portugal was a great one. I never would have put Portugal on my list, and now it's my number one. And people go to, they message me after they go. We went to the place you went, or whatever it is, and they have these great experiences. And if I can encourage more people to do that, because it really is the greatest teacher, and it's not always fun. Like, travel can be exhausting. You can have bad experiences traveling, just like you can bad experiences and you go out somewhere in America. But you learn something and you say, okay, I'd like to take that with me. I'd like to take that mindset with me. Or I wish we did things like that here. And then there's also components where you come back grateful and you go, man, I'm so grateful for what I have here. It goes both ways. That's the brilliant thing about traveling. And I really hope I can encourage people to see as many places as they can, because in 2025, it's never been more accessible with the way, you used to have to have a travel agent, and now you can just go on your computer and plan a trip to Japan today and be there tomorrow. It's wild.
Yes.
What a gift.
Yeah, that's something we try to push too, is, take the leap, take the trip, whatever that might be, because you don't know what tomorrow holds.
100%.
So. Mm-hmm. Well, Vince, this has been amazing. It's been very enlightening. It's been fun. Where can people find you? Obviously, V is for Vino, but go ahead and tell us, where else can people find you?
Yeah, the easiest way is on YouTube. So if you search V is for Vino, we'll come right up. We just released 2 episodes, Bourgogne, or Burgundy as people know it, and Loire. Literally just released those 2 weeks ago, 2 French episodes that I'm really excited about. And you get to see Lisa in the Loire episode a lot. So if anybody wants to see her, she's actually in front of the camera. So that's an exciting one. You can also see some episodes on other platforms like Amazon Prime and things, but I'd rather have it be free. And it's free on YouTube. You just have to watch ads, or you can join our Vino VIP club. It's like $5 a month, and it helps support us. And then you get it ad free and a bunch of other content. So that's my plug for the day.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Vince. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Cheers to a great 2025.
Yeah, thank you guys. Congratulations again on everything, and baby number 2. I'm so excited for you guys.